On behalf of all assembled here today, I should now like to invite our newest alumni, Sister Margo Ritchie, to address Convocation.
Well, thank you so much. So Chancellor Rotman, President Chakma, Principal Sylvester, distinguished faculty, graduates, and many, many family and friends. First and foremost, congratulations to each one of you today. You know the financial choices that you and your family have made, the moments of self-doubt and feeling overwhelmed, and the joy of learning something new with others. And here you are today, both at an ending, but more interestingly, at a beginning. Recently, as I was driving somewhere, I was listening to CBC, and there was an interview with Shin Dong-hook, a 26-year-old political prisoner in one of North Korea's harsh prison camps. He was born in the prison camp and knew nothing of another way of living. This was the full extent of his world for 19 years. Amazingly, and against all odds, he escaped when he was 19. The book, Escape from Camp 14, was written by journalist Blaine Harden in collaboration with Shin. It tells Shin's story in the camp and the process of returning to a world that he never knew existed. At present, he is involved in human rights work in South Korea. But here's the piece that caught my attention and made me think of you today. Through translation, Shin said that the biggest task for him was learning to be human. He described trying to cry and trying to laugh to see if he could mimic what he thought being human could be, to see if he could translate the crying and laughing into an actual emotion that he might experience. He described that he had a long way to go. Ever so slowly and painfully, he was coming to know that others were more than competitors for food, as he had been taught. He was adamant that the biggest task for him, when all was said and done, was learning to be human. It took my breath away. It got me thinking. I think this might be our most significant task also. From what I know so far, becoming human means knowing in our bones that we belong to each other. It means experiencing that relationships are the connective tissue of life. Fundamentally, it means, especially in this complex world, learning to live in the shelter of each other. Perhaps some of you grew up in neighborhoods where you actually knew your neighbors. I remember my mother going door to door when we were growing up when a relative of one of the neighbors had died, collecting money for flowers. And one step beyond that, we see expansive outpourings of simple human community when tragedy strikes, as, for example, at the Boston Marathon or the Winnipeg floods. And now, the relatively new awareness for us is that we live in one neighborhood called planet Earth. Our real task, if we are to become human, is to get to know this neighborhood. It is to discover each country, each person, each species as a neighbor with whom we quite literally share common ground. Knowing in our bones that we belong to each other. Fundamentally, this is what the Truth and Reconciliation process in Canada is all about. Today, June 11th, marks the 5th anniversary of the Government of Canada's official apology and seeking reconciliation with Indigenous peoples in Canada. We, Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples, share a common history, fractured by the refusal to see otherness as essential to a vibrant culture. This refusal manifests as domination of one group over another, but I think more primally and fundamentally, it manifests as a loss of human connection that blinded us to the often devastating consequences of residential schools. I'm part of a local truth and reconciliation initiative where I'm learning that truth is both very painful and potentially healing, and that reconciliation is not a once and for all affair. This is absolutely the moment to write with our lives, our policies, our deepest common humanity, a new story in Canada. As our Aboriginal friends passionately and with considerable exasperation tell us, the history is not simply in the past. It repeats and replays today in 1,000 different iterations. It is time to say with our lives that this matters to us. Perhaps this is where some of your brightest and best energy will go. But I think this part's really important. Find the hinge place in your own experience that connects to the whole, because this is how real change happens. And here's what I mean. On our committee, we have a Jewish woman whose great-grandparents were part of the Holocaust. She has found the hinge place in her own experience that makes working to heal the relationship between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal peoples in Canada connect in a way that deepens her commitment. Another man who moved here to Canada not long ago from Yemen is playing a vital role in this committee. He could easily say that he's not responsible for the broken history in Canada since he is a newcomer. Don't pin this one on me. It's not my problem. It's yours. Yet, he doesn't go there. What he does is, he knows, because of the indiscriminate use and stereotypes that he himself has experienced, that there is a hinge place. As a Muslim, he has experienced some of this since his arrival in Canada. It resurfaces many, many times. He knows, of course, that the story of discrimination that Aboriginal peoples experience and that Muslim populations experience is distinct and unique. He gets that. However, in his hinge place, he knows that they are a common human problem. They are our common human problem. Who knows, but some of you in this room might use your social work, your political, educational, business, systemic justice skills to make a difference in rewriting our common history in Canada. Being human means knowing in our bones that we belong to each other. Our culture is not so kind to people who, from one point of view, cannot quite make it in our culture. I would feel very confident in betting that all of us in this room have experienced the confusion and feelings of helplessness surrounding mental illness. Maybe it's with a friend whose depression simply will not go away no matter how much you encourage. Perhaps it's in your placement work where someone your age is learning to live with schizophrenia. Perhaps it's in the eyes of someone who's homeless and you see the weariness of invisibility. And maybe even for all of us, we get glimpses of it at times when we look in the mirror. Mental illness is one of the most painful labels to carry and closes so many doors in a culture that is so unsure about how to deal with vulnerability. Probably because so many of us live close to that edge at various points. Perhaps you will put your energy into practice and policy that refuse to let people be on the margins of life as if it were a preordained fact. Perhaps in your role as educator or parent or life partner, you will have the compassion and stamina enough to change the story of how our culture views people who have mental illness. Find the hinge place that connects to your own personal experience and to do something for the good of the whole. It strikes me that it's so easy to be cynical and incapable of trust these days. Read the newspaper, or for that matter, listen to our own conversations. It's so easy to move to a place of no trust. Sometimes our very starting point is the assumption that our political, religious, educational leaders are not telling us the truth. I was making good on a Christmas gift a few weeks ago at an olive oil tasting bistro. The owner, who has a tremendous passion for olive oil, told us that what most of us buy in the grocery store isn't really olive oil at all. It flashed through my mind that not even olive oil can be trusted these days. But here's the thing. This is what really matters. Perhaps you will be the ones who let integrity grow within you so that the inner of who you are and the outer of who you are keep intertwining in a way in which they become indistinguishable. Perhaps you will be the ones to say with your lives that integrity in my home, at work, in my relationships matter to me. They matter to us. And truth be told, if they matter to us, we will begin to see more integrity mirrored back to us than we ever imagined possible. So how do we live our ordinary, extraordinary personal lives in ways that express the depth and love and initiative that show that we value relationships? And the question that sits right beside this one, how do we create a global neighborhood in which the actual experience of each nation, each person, each species is that we know in our bones that we belong to each other? A very wise teacher that I had at university said to me when I was in the middle of some research that I was finding kind of disturbing, she said, always follow your questions all the way down to their end until you meet a new question that demands your attention and your love. Follow it as if your life depended on it, because it does. This small tidbit of advice is worth its weight in gold, both at a personal and a collective level. It is an intriguing and a demanding way to live. And the last thing I want to say to you is that I hope that you learn joy. Right in the midst of all that seems hopeless from one point of view, sometimes we just have to hunker down in the moment together and learn joy. Learn to look around, not to mention within, and see beauty. Cultivate an eye for goodness in its myriad large and small forms. Cultivate a heart that leans toward compassion and largesse of spirit, and that tilts away from judgment and smallness. I really hope for you that you learn the exquisite joy of throwing in your lot with others who are going for broke in their desire to create a more hospitable world, who dare the exhilaration of what seems so impossible that it makes it worthwhile. And always, always cultivate compassion for yourself as you learn the ways of being human. Such soul-sized questions we face together. How can we live interdependently on the planet with 7 billion people and a whole host of other than human species when on any given day it can feel like an heroic act to live interdependently with one other person? Such heartfelt questions we live with. Will my life make a difference to others? We each hope to be in relationships that nurture the best of who we are and to know the fullest range of our capacity to love another and to contribute to the whole. And I want to end with a kind of blessing, really, by Barbara Kingsolver, who is an American novelist. She puts it this way: the very least you can do in your life is to figure out what you hope for. The most you can do is live inside that hope, running down its hallways, touching the walls on both sides. My deepest desire and prayer for you is that you live inside that hope in all the moments of your life, with whatever life throws at you, with whatever choices you make. Show with your life what matters to you, and make it about relationship, because only relationship contains the energy and the largesse to express our deepest humanity. My deepest and fond congratulations to each of you.